Today, not another year, optimism runs dry in parts of Alberta. Men's mental health, time to buddy up for suicide prevention. And fire in the ground, planning a summer pit roast. Welcome back to the Bovine. I'm your host, Deborah Murphy. Last month I had the opportunity to travel to the Linden, Alberta area. I met ABP's Environmental Stewardship Award recipients, Jerry and Dawn Berg, and their family. It was an honor to tour some of their ranch, but it was hard to ignore the crunch of the grass beneath our feet. And the Bergs aren't alone. For many areas of the province, the dry conditions are carrying on, and it's those conditions that have inspired this episode of the show. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with an update from a Medicine Hat area farmer and rancher, and then move into a conversation on looking out for one another. We'll round the show off with an easy chat on pit roasting. It's my hope that the show inspires you to have tough conversations, but also to bring friends and family together for a non-work event. Let's get together just for the pure fun of it.
I hate to be the guy of doom and gloom, and that's definitely not the angle I like to take on things, but 6 years of this, and it's really starting to take its toll in this country. And I guess the other important thing to recognize is the native prairie in this country, just because it starts to rain tomorrow and things start to get back to elevated moisture levels, this area needs time to recover from this severe of a drought. And the ranchers, this is going to take years to recover from.
You might recognize that voice. That's Craig Lehr. He's an Alberta Beef Producers Delegate who farms near Medicine Hat, Alberta. Now, we'd hope not to say the D word this year, but areas of the province are incredibly dry, with some, including the greater Lethbridge area, experiencing 1 in 50-year precipitation low so far this growing season. And as you heard, for some, it's not the first or even the second year. In May, I had the chance to catch up with Craig. He joined the video call from his tractor, which was a nice surprise. So that's where we started our conversation. Can you give us a bit of a description of what it's like out there in your field?
Well, I'm currently out in the Cypress Hills on the Alberta side, up on top of what we call the bench, so the very top end of the Cypress Hills. And things don't look too bad out here. It's a little later season out here. Things are greening up a little bit, but it is unusually dry out here as well this year. So we're just putting some fertilizer down and crossing our fingers and hoping for the best.
So you say out here compared to, is it a little bit further from your main operation?
Yeah, so our main operation is just northeast of Medicine Hat. And then from there, our land base is spread out east over to the Irvine area and north of Irvine as well. And then out here in the Cypress Hills, where we run a lot of native prairie and run the cows for the summer. So 2 unique climates, I guess. And the Cypress Hills has actually been our saving grace over the years. Had really good years out here, but like everywhere else, last summer turned dry, and things haven't improved over the winter, and they're not improving this spring.
You said over the years, before we started recording, you did let me know that this isn't the first year or even just the second year that you've dealt with dry conditions. Can you walk us through what the drought has been like for you?
Well, this has been ongoing. We're getting into year 6 now of the drought here in the Medicine Hat area. It's varied a little bit throughout the years. Most of the springs, fortunately, we've been able to get a bit of spring moisture, which is what this area needs as far as the grass goes. The grasses are all native prairies, all cool season grasses. It needs that spring moisture to get growing. And we've been getting a little bit of it, but not enough. And, runoff situation's been a little tight as well. So, this has been an ongoing issue for us, and it's starting to kind of come to a head now that we're 6 years into it. The prairie's just getting chewed down, even in very well-managed grasslands, and the situation's getting quite dire.
So the spring moisture this year hasn't been very fruitful, I take it?
No, this year is actually the worst so far. As far as spring moisture goes, we've really had none to speak of, a few tenths here and there. Things are greening up at home, especially in the Medicine Hat area. We had a little shower on the weekend, green things up slightly, but there's just not enough there to get any growth out of anything. There's a little bit of rain in the forecast coming up, but it's not going to be very much. And, we need a significant shot of moisture to get this grass growing.
Well, that's part of the reason that I did talk to you early is I'm hoping Murphy's Law extends to you and that by the time this goes to air, you've had ample moisture. Last fall, were you able to access any of the agri-recovery funding that was provided through the federal and provincial governments?
Yeah, we were actually. We took all the advantage we could out of that program. The program was pretty timely. It made a big difference in helping with the feed supply and whatnot. It's just with the soaring costs and stuff, it was definitely timely. The previous years, it was mostly just our area that was in a severe drought. So hay prices and whatnot were elevated, but with the area being so large last year and right down into the States, there was so much pressure on the feed market here, obviously, as everyone knows, that it really sent the feed costs soaring. So it was definitely a big benefit to us.
Do you access any other business risk management tools?
The grass insurance program has been valuable for us over the years, especially the last 5-6 years. It's been a very valuable tool. The years previous, it's always nice to have, and it didn't pay out every year, and which is fine. It's not supposed to. And I'd love to see a few years where it doesn't need to pay out. That would be really nice. So the grass insurance, Ag Stability, Ag Invest, we're involved in all of those as well. And, we have a feedlot in our operation as well. And so all our calves go into there, and we utilize the livestock price insurance program as well through the feedlot.
How about managing on the ground? Have you changed a lot of your management practices as a result of the ongoing drought, and maybe even this spring? Will you have to change what you had hoped to do?
Yeah, it's basically in this country you always have to plan for a drought and a bad summer. You never know when it's coming. It may only be 1 year of lack of moisture in the spring or a hot, dry summer, but you always have to plan for it. You have to graze accordingly, and you have to allow those grass reserves to build up. So come the dry seasons or dry years, you can maintain your herd and keep things going. And that's where the situation in this country is getting so dire. Is even the very well managed pastures, the reserves are gone, and cows are going to start going to market.
Are your cows going to start going to market?
Well, I sure hope not. We run a fairly large land base. As mentioned previous, it is fairly spread out, and the Cypress Hills has been our saving grace over the last number of years. We've had some really good grass years out here, so that's allowed us to maintain things. On top of our cow herd, we can typically on an average year run 800 to 900 or well over 1,000 yearlings on grass as well. We've been running less over the last several years, and maybe more than we should have, just trying to grass these cattle and ride some markets out to be able to make a few dollars on them. So we've maybe pushed things a little bit harder than we should have. We are now down to basically no yearlings at all this year and spreading the cows out over the whole land base. And if this continues on as is, we could be running out of grass as well. So to me, it really emphasizes how dire the situation could be getting if we don't get rain here within the next 2 to 3 weeks.
Do you have animals on grass now, maybe despite hoping to give it a bit of a break?
The cows are still at home in the calving pastures. We're slowly starting to move them out. Our calving areas and those intense grazing areas that we use in the spring, as we move cows out, they've sure taken a beating over the last number of years. We rely a lot on crested wheat grasses and the early spring grasses in those areas. And, this spring, some of the crested wheat has barely even greened up, which kind of tells you how dry it is and how little growth we've been getting. So we're kind of holding off as long as we can. We're feeding a lot of hay still to the cows, trying to give the prairie a chance to grow. But we need the moisture to do it. So.
Do you grain farm as well, Craig?
Yeah, we do. So we've got about 3,000 acres of dry land farming on top of the irrigation at home. So we've been able to utilize that. We haven't been combining every acre every year, depending on hit and miss with the showers. So we've been grazing some farmland and stuff the last couple of years as well to save some of the prairie grass and help maintain the herds as much as we can and try to make a dollar out of it. So it's been a challenge for sure.
You mentioned that the next 2 to 3 weeks are going to be really important. What happens after that? Will you have to make some of those tougher management decisions that we kind of talked about?
Quite possibly. We'll be good for the year as far as maintaining the cow herd goes. So that's good. But like I said, it'd be a great year to be running a lot of yearlings given where the markets are at. But we just don't have that option this year. So, we're kind of set in motion for the year at this point. If things stay real bad come fall, we may not have a lot of fall grazing left to do for these cows. Last fall was really, really great. We were able to keep cows out on native prairie till well into December in a lot of places and utilized a lot of grass. But, like I said, those reserves are getting pretty low. So depending how it goes, it's going to be, there might be decisions to be made coming up yet. So
I just want to read a tweet because I think in our brief interactions, I've gotten the impression that you do like a good laugh. But recently you tweeted something a little bit tougher. You said, "I'm sad to announce that for the time being, all of my eternal optimism and hope related to weather and cattle markets is officially on hold. I have been defeated." Can you tell us about that tweet?
Well, it was a pretty bleak looking day. The country, it was a very hot, windy day. And there was moisture in the forecast that disappeared. The wind picked up. There was dust blowing in this country, alkali sloughs blowing. This has been a long haul in this country, and I'm pretty much an eternal optimist. I have my days in this industry where you're just, this isn't for me. There's got to be better solutions. There's, you get a little down, but I always wake up the next day with a smile on my face and get to work, and that optimism returns. And it's getting to be tough to swallow. It's been too many years. And, it's not only the drought situation now, it's like everybody else, the input costs, the cost of production is going up. The hope of the market's going up is being defeated now by the feed costs. And, now we're taking a beating on that. And so it would be nice to be able to make some money again and get a bit of rain and, be able to put some money back in the business.
It looks like you're not alone. There were a number of people who replied to that saying, we feel it too, and sharing pictures of dust storms in their area. Are you seeing your friends and peers having more of those down days as well?
Yeah, I guess, everybody's getting a little more down on it. So I've had the opportunity in the last week. I've spent some time on the phone talking to some producers and meeting people and asking, what's your grass situation? How are you guys doing? What point are you getting to? And I haven't talked to anybody yet who's either not selling cows, preparing to sell cows, or seriously questioning whether they have enough grass for the summer to maintain their herd. So when you start getting everybody answering like that, the situation is getting pretty severe.
If the drought continues beyond these 2 to 3 weeks, what sort of support will you and your neighbors need to keep going to get through it?
Well, definitely there's going to be cows going to market, so I think we'll be in a tax deferral situation for sure. And I think one thing that needs to be examined with that is maybe looking at a longer term tax deferral, not just 1 year. As I said, this grass needs time to recover. And, getting rid of a bunch of cows, and if things did come back and moisture starts to come back, you get a bunch of guys coming back on the cow market. You can kind of create a false market as well. And then, the feed supply. We're not going to have any hay in this country again if things don't change in a hurry. Feed supplies are going to be tight all over again. So getting hay into this country is going to be a very expensive challenge. And it may push a lot of guys out. Is what might happen here in the near future, because we can't afford to be continuing to pay these high hay prices.
That was Craig Lehr of Shortgrass Ranches near Medicine Hat. Are you dealing with difficult growing conditions due to moisture extremes? Tag Alberta Beef Producers on social media, or feel free to get in touch with me through podcasting at albertabeef.org, and certainly let your local government know. As ABP Chair Dr. Melanie Wolk recently said, quote, "The more proactive we can be as an industry, the easier it is to identify which areas are struggling and what they need," end quote. You can find more about how to do that and why it's important by reading the article Preparing for Another Dry Growing Season on ABP Daily. I'll link to that in the show notes. And keep up to date on all things drought dry conditions at abpdaily.com/drought. Up next, checking in on friends, family, and yourself. The Center for Suicide Prevention is inviting everyone, individuals and groups, to become champions this Buddy Up month. Well, we can be pretty good at giving our agriculture friends help through custom work or picking up a part when we're in town, but how often do we ask them how they're really doing? That question plays a very significant role in the Buddy Up campaign, and joining us now to talk about that is Akash Asif, External Relations Director at the Center for Suicide Prevention. Akash, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you very much. Excited to be here.
Well, the name provides a pretty good explanation of the basics, I think, but what's your elevator pitch for what the Center for Suicide Prevention does?
Yeah, absolutely. So Center for Suicide Prevention is an education center based in Calgary, Alberta, and we are a branch of the Canadian Mental Health Association. And for over 40 years, we've been equipping Canadians with the information, knowledge, and skills necessary to respond to people at risk of suicide. So we educate kind of by our workshops, resources, and through our community engagement.
One of your campaigns is Buddy Up. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so in 2020, the Center for Suicide Prevention launched Buddy Up, and that's really a campaign to promote authentic conversations among men and their buddies. Really, this campaign focuses on help offering behavior. So what do I mean by that? It means that the campaign targets the community and friends of someone who may be struggling with thoughts about suicide. We know that at any given time, 1 in 20 individuals could be having thoughts of suicide. So what we're doing with this campaign is challenging the other 19 to pay attention and provide support. So really, this campaign has two components. One is a visual message, and the second one is a guide. So with the visual message, and you said the tagline already, it's all about how are you really doing? And what we've done with this tagline is we've created personas who each have their own story. So for example, you have a construction worker, business professional, older adult, as well as an agriculture producer. And what these characters and personas are doing is they're making the campaign more approachable because people can relate these characters and their stories with someone in their life. They make a serious topic a little easier to talk about. So that's the visual message. And then the second piece is our guide. So this is a guide on how men can help our buddies. So we talked about the community helping. How do we actually help? During our conversations with our men, as we drafted and created this campaign, we were told that men are willing to help their buddies, but they don't know how to even get started. That's why I made it easier by creating a 4-step guide on having authentic conversations with someone you're worried about. So really, visual message and guide is what makes up Buddy Up.
I want to get more into those steps to helping somebody, but first, we're talking a lot about men. Why is there such a focus on men in this campaign?
Yeah, it's a good question. And what I'll start with is that just on a general level, we know that suicide is a public health crisis. And each year, more people die by suicide than war and homicide combined. And from all these suicides, middle-aged men, around 40 to 65, die by suicide more than any other group. And that includes young people as well as women. That's what really makes men a priority population when thinking about suicide prevention. Why? Why are men at risk? One is because men are expected to be stoic, and we're just expected to endure pain or hardship without showing our feelings or complaining. We're told that weakness will diminish our manlyhood. I mean, I've heard it growing up, grow a pair, grow up, be a man, those sayings. And there's this expectation that we'll persevere through adverse situations. And so due to these expectations, men are less likely than women often to seek help when they're struggling. As well as a group, men are more likely than women to lose relationships over time, often because they prioritize career and financial success over relationships. So that's why they have less people to talk to, even if they are struggling.
Some of the things that we've talked about this before, you and I, because I've thought, I actually relate to a lot of these things as well. So it's not necessarily excluding women, right? We can still glean something from the campaign as well.
Absolutely. So this campaign is available and accessible for anyone, right? So the 4-step guide that we can go into in a bit more detail, anyone can have a conversation. Anyone can have an authentic conversation, right? And really buddying up, the concept of buddying up is, different genders might have different buddies for genders and whatnot. So really it's accessible, but the focus is on men as a whole.
You mentioned Clay. In our latest issue of ABP Magazine, we showcased Clay. I guess you didn't say him by name, but he's the agriculture producer. Basically, he's one of the personas that are cartoon caricatures who represent men who may be struggling with mental health or mental illness. Tell us about those again a little bit in more detail. Where did the idea for those men come from, and what do they hope to achieve?
Yeah, absolutely. Like you mentioned, Clay, our agriculture producer, which is our latest release there. But really, before I start answering kind of a little bit around Clay, I just want to share a little bit about how this campaign was created. And really, it still continues to be created and formed by an advisory committee and vetted by all male focus groups. So what do I mean by that? Primarily men, some women have been involved as well, but over 75 people from various backgrounds have been and continue to be involved in creating this campaign and keeping it fresh. And so we know that often men are more willing to help their buddies than themselves. So why not leverage that? That's where the whole help offering behavior comes in. And what the characters do is they make the campaign approachable because people can relate these cartoony looking characters, these personas, and their stories with someone in their life. Right? So instead of showing men with their head in their hands in a dark place, I see lots of posters like that, and those certainly have their place. Instead, what we've decided to do is make it a little more fun, make a little bit of a serious topic easier to talk about. You'll also notice that if you go onto our website, buddyup.ca, and see all the different characters, not all of them look distressed. And that was really important for us. And it's really to portray that often someone might not look visibly distressed when they're considering suicide. You might not even see it on the surface. And that's why it's important that any changes in behavior and look at those changes beyond just someone's physical appearance there. So really, it's those personas that are trying to kind of make the campaign more approachable, accessible, as well as just make a serious topic a little easier to talk about.
So why did you get so specific with each of the characters? We see cartoons that are meant to represent everybody, but I think you're getting a little bit more into the nitty gritty here. So what was the impetus for that?
Absolutely here. I mean, I can speak a little bit to kind of why we decided to create Clay, for example, as one of our characters there. So after launching this campaign, very quickly, it became evident that we needed a persona that represents kind of the agriculture community there. To be honest, we didn't start with that. That was not one of our first 5, for example, of that. And then we realized that the campaign was spreading and there was a need. And I started getting phone calls from folks that said, I have people in my life, I have a farmer in my life, and they're not doing well. What can I do to support them? And that happened continuously over a few months. So we decided, let's listen to our audience here. And so during our initial research, though, I would say, we realized very quickly that there are lots of complexities involved in kind of the agriculture community. There's a lot of different folks. And for example, the differences between Eastern Canada versus Western Canada and the intricacies involved in that there. So that's when we asked for help. And so that's when Clay, an agriculture producer, was developed with input from 3 different organizations from across Canada, which includes the Do More Agriculture Foundation, Alberta Beef Producers, as well as the Canadian Mental Health Association, the Alberta Division's Rural Mental Health Project. So just like all personas, Clay also has a story, so I'd be happy to share his story very quickly. And so from everyone's help, this is what we came up with. So here I go. Clay's farm isn't doing well this year, and he says he hasn't been able to finish his daily jobs. He's not going to the coffee shop or texting friends anymore. If you know a buddy like Clay, reach out, offer support. So that is Clay's story, and we're hoping that his story and her appearance, even the way that he looks, can resonate with people in the community, and then we're willing to reach out to someone they're worried about.
It catches my eye. It looks a lot like people that I know in agriculture. I think you gave a few hints when you talked about his story, but can we talk a little bit more about how we recognize when stress is becoming too much for ourselves or others? In ag, we're dealing with isolation lots of times, external challenges like the drought we've seen and may be seeing into this year. So what do we look for?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think it goes back to my earlier point about any change in behavior can be an invitation sign for someone who may be struggling or considering suicide, for example. So it goes back to kind of, doesn't have to be just physically distressed looking or visibly kind of distressed. Instead, what else is happening? What else is happening in their life is really important to recognize as well. So what do these warning signs potentially look like here? So for example, losing interest in hobbies or activities they normally enjoy. If you go back to Clay's story a little bit there, he's no longer going to the coffee shop anymore. So why? Why is he not going anymore? Another example could be disconnecting from family and friends. So once again, in Clay's story, he's no longer texting. Why is that? Why is he all of a sudden stopping and no longer texting his friends and family? That's a change. That's a behavior change. That's an invitation for someone to go out and seek help, as well as to go and offer help as well. Drinking alcohol or taking drugs more than is normal for them is another warning sign that you can look at, as well as irritability and anger. Lastly, I just want to speak about emotion suppression as well. So denying or not experiencing feelings and emotion is something that's important to you. But I also want to preface that it doesn't always have to be that someone is sad or angry, right? What if someone who is kind of base level is all of a sudden incredibly happy? It feels like they have found a way to kind of just fix everything and they're super happy, and all of a sudden they're at this high spot. I mean, hopefully that's the case and they're doing well, but at the same time, why? That is also an invitation and a change in behavior. Why is that all of a sudden someone gone from kind of base level to high as well? So I feel like it's important to kind of look at the lower level of the baseline as well as the high as well.
I could see people listening being kind of confused, so we look for extreme happiness or extreme sadness or somewhere in the middle. But you said it when you said why, right? If there's ever behavior change and we wonder why, isn't it just simple as asking what's up?
Yeah, absolutely there, right? And I think it could be challenging, and I'll be the first to admit that it can be awkward and it can be scary, but I think that's all it takes, right? Sometimes it's just asking someone what's going on, and maybe the answer is, you know what, I just won the lottery, and that's why I'm incredibly happy, and that's just it. But sometimes it's you're relieving a ton of pressure on someone, right? It's not easy to ask for help when you are struggling and having those thoughts. And if someone asks you and brings it up, maybe it's a time that like releases a ton of weight on your shoulders. Finally, someone's asking you, so that's sometimes important too. So I would encourage you, as awkward as it is, to really reach out if you are worried.
And that's part of the 4 pieces that the Center for Suicide Prevention is suggesting through their campaign. Can you just quickly run through those? When we see someone struggling, what are those 4 pieces that we should consider?
For sure. So this is a 4-step guide that we created. And the steps are really: 1, pay attention to start a conversation; 3, keep it going; and 4, stick to your role. So I will briefly dive into each one of these steps here. So the first one is pay attention. So we've talked a lot about this during our conversation today. So we can start by paying attention to the people around us. Any noticeable change in someone's behavior can be considered a warning sign. We talked about a few of these, but not texting or calling as much. Drinking more than usual, appearing tired and distant. These are all different types of warning signs that are changes in behavior. Then once you've noticed that, start a conversation. Choose a setting that you're comfortable with. For example, some prefer talking over the phone, while others do not feel it's easy with phone conversations and want to meet in person. When you've chosen that comfortable setting, be direct and mention what you've noticed. For example, I haven't heard from you much these days. Is everything okay? Or something along the lines of, you haven't been gaming lately. Are you okay? You haven't been coming to the coffee shop. What's going on? Show your support and do not blame or shame them. That's the second one. You paid attention, you started that conversation. The third one is probably the most difficult, which is to keep that conversation going. If someone tells you that they're not doing well, I'll be the first to admit it can become difficult and awkward very quickly. However, it is important to continue the dialogue with your buddy. Do not change the subject and avoid problem solving. Acknowledge your feelings, and if you are still worried, ask the question directly. Are you thinking about suicide? If they are, do not panic and let them know you're there for them. So that's the first 3 steps. Paid attention, started a conversation, and you kept it going. Lastly, stick to your role. You don't have to do it alone. We want to help our buddies, but we are not counselors. Encourage them to reach out to others or even call the crisis line together. Check in with them often following the conversation and show them support. If they do have imminent plans to die, contact 911 and ensure they're not left alone. So really to recap, the 4 steps are 1, pay attention, 2, start a conversation, 3, keep it going, and 4, stick to your role.
Those really help. You said something in there that I think is going to be challenging for a lot of men, and that is do not problem solve. Why is it important to not do that? We hear a problem, we want to help it. Maybe if we help it, we'll help the person behind it. Can you give us some background on that?
Absolutely. I think the importance of not problem solving is to allow for a safe space for someone who might be struggling and to give them the space to share what they're thinking and share their thoughts, right? If you start offering judgment or you start problem solving, you're not listening. And to me, the most important aspect of helping and supporting someone is to actively listen to someone, ask questions, listen to them, and connect them to the proper supports and resources. Oftentimes, we all love to problem solve. I mean, I do it all the time, even though I get told not to do it. So it's certainly not easy to not do. But I think at the same time with problem solving, it's tough. But I would encourage everyone to sit back, listen, but not just listen so you can get done with it and go and solve the problem, but actually actively listen and listen to what the person's going through and ask questions.
One of the signature times of the year for the Buddy Up campaign is June. Can you tell us about Buddy Up Month, what it is to become a champion?
Absolutely. So the annual Buddy Up campaign month takes place in June, which overall overlaps with Men's Health Month as well as Father's Day. And so during June, we ask our champions can be individuals and or groups, to help us raise awareness. Currently, the campaign has over 500 champions, and there are no minimum expectations or costs associated with this campaign. Your level of engagement completely depends on your level of comfort. So when I say champions, what do I mean by that? What can champions do to help us raise awareness, promote the campaign, and promote the messaging? During June, the Buddy Up campaign will have a communications component and an activity component. For the communications component, champions can share information via social media. We have a kit ready to go on our website, engage in internal group messaging such as newsletters, intranet within your company, as well as order swag. Swag is free and includes posters, infographics, toolkits, stickers, air fresheners, and wallet cards. So many of these are pretty intuitive. Posters, our infographic poster with the 4 steps. These you can put on the wall, for example. But why stickers and air fresheners? And this comes back to kind of creating that safe space. Really, a lot of men told us when we were developing this campaign, I'm willing to have conversations and I get the guide, but I'm not willing to have a conversation unless it's an intimate setting and I don't want to make eye contact. That's just too awkward and I'm not willing to do that. So that's when we said, would you have conversations in a vehicle? Just said yes, and we came up with the idea of car air fresheners. So you put a car air freshener in your vehicle, your buddy might ask you, hey, what's this about? And you might tell them what it is, and all of a sudden what you've done is you've told them you're a safe person. You're someone they can ask for help, as well as you've given yourself a little bit of that social license to ask someone else if they're struggling about suicide, because you're part of it. You've agreed to it and you're showing it, right? Same thing with stickers. Stickers can go on hard hats, they can go on the back of your phone, they can go on your equipment. It's all about showing that, hey, I'm here for you and I'm here to listen and I'm here to be with you. And finally, in June, what would a campaign be without a challenge? Last year, we created the Buddy Up Challenge with activities to promote mental well-being and drive connection. Anyone can participate. So going back earlier, it doesn't just have to be men. Anyone can participate, and there are some amazing prizes to be won. And to cap it off, if you want to become a champion or to learn more, go to buddyyup.ca and sign up today.
If there's someone out there listening right now who's seeing the signs you mentioned in someone they love or maybe even themselves, what's your message to them?
Yeah, I've alluded to this a little bit before, but I know it can be incredibly uncomfortable and scary, but I really would encourage everyone to reach out and have a conversation with someone you are worried about, as well as to seek out help if you are also struggling with thoughts of suicide. You might be, like I said, lifting a giant load off someone's shoulders. It's really, really hard to ask for help. So when someone brings it up, it really can lighten that load for them. Finally someone has reached out to me. As well, take the 4-step guide or simply listen. Like I said, don't problem solve, don't provide judgment. Many of us are not counselors. Understand that. You're not there to go and solve problems. However, we can be there to listen and help connect that individual to proper resources and support them as their buddy.
Akash, this is an important conversation. I'm grateful you were able to join us to talk about it. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
That was Akash Asif, External Relations Director for the Center for Suicide Prevention. And here's your challenge. Find out more about Buddy Up Month by heading to buddyyup.ca and join Alberta beef producers by signing up as a champion today. Up next, getting outdoors and sharing a meal, the how-tos of pit roasting. Well, many of us recall pit roast from years gone by when large cattle processing events and community gatherings were more common. You likely know the basics. Dig a pit, build up a bed of hot coals, add meat and cover. Now let's get into the details. It's barbecue season year-round for our next guest, but it's pretty hard to dig a pit in frozen ground, so I guess he's resigned to the fact that we have to do some form of the pit roast in the summer. Welcome back to the show, Mel Chmilar Jr.
Thank you very much, madam. Happy to be here.
So can you tell us how has pit roasting changed in the decades that have gone by? Is it still even a thing?
So the traditional dig a pit, fill it full of rocks and hot coals, wrap everything in tin foil and throw it in the hole, that's still very much a thing. And it's still just as cool as it was way back when. Absolutely love it. But like you say, in our climate especially, it's definitely not an option for 9 months of the year, right? So we've gotten a lot more creative. One with using smokers, right? Ceramic grills. Guys are using barrels now. There's all kinds of options for roasting and pit roasting, but it's definitely changed and evolved a ton. So, yeah.
Can we talk about location a bit? Like, what are some things to consider when you're choosing a spot to do one of these pit roasts, aside from maybe not digging out a piece of your lawn if you can help it?
So the first thing is dig a test hole and see what's under there. If you're about to hit 2 feet of clay, don't even mess with it. That's going to be a horrible Sunday afternoon, let me tell you. So for sure, test hole is your first location, and then make sure you're a bit away from the forest or bush, anything that's going to catch fire. Make sure there's no power lines or gas lines running underneath you, right? Always just check ahead before you go digging any holes. Other than that, you can't really control the wind. It's easy to build a windbreaker anyway. It's pretty self-explanatory. You dig a hole and you're ready to go.
What size of a pit do you need?
Well, you're going to build it to fit what you're throwing in there, right? Your standard hole is roughly 3 feet around, 2 feet deep, give or take. It's a fairly large pit, but you're feeding a ton of people. If you're going to go through that effort of digging a hole, you're going to want some room, definitely. And then also, odds are a good farmer, they're going to have a rock pile right off the side of their field, and those are the rocks you want. You want those nice, round, heavy rocks. Get a nice bed of those for the bottom of your pit. And that's the magic there. When you light a fire on top of those rocks, the rocks are going to heat up. And then once your fire dies down into coals, the coals are resting inside of red hot rocks. And that's when you set your meat down on top of that.
So what does it matter what we use for fuel to get that fire going? Like, would you use wood or coal or a combination thereof?
You could use, you can use either or. Wood. So this is this applies everywhere. With whatever type of wood you're using, it's probably not good for smoking. If you got wood up here, pine, cedar, all of that, not good for smoking at all. But once you reach that coal point, when the wood has burnt off all the moisture it has, there's no longer smoke and it's become a red coal, all red coals are the same. So there, right there, you can cook over it. It's not going to make any lick of difference with the smoke that's coming off of it because it's already burnt out. All the poisons and things that you don't want in say, trying to smoke with pine is totally eliminated. After it turns into a red coal, it's neutral.
Makes it pretty easy for anybody to do anywhere.
Exactly. And that's the thing. So all of my live fire cooking, it's the same premise. You're going to make a big bonfire. You're going to get that bonfire down to a huge bed of red coals, and then you're mint to cook over top of it. You're fine.
How long will it take to get that huge bed of red hot coals?
You're looking at about 2 hours. 2 hours, give or take the size of your logs too, right? That always comes into account. You want to split your logs. You don't want to be burning stumps in there unless you're going all day, right? But you want the coals to turn into actual red coals, not still pieces of smoldering wood.
And 2 hours will be long enough to heat up those rocks at the bottom as well?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, they get hot quick.
I know a lot of people will then place a piece of plywood on top once everything's all ready and cover it in soil. Why is that important, and what are the keys to a good cover?
So the plywood with soil is the best. That's the trick, is that you're locking the steam from that beef in there, as well as making almost like a radiant heat. It's coming up, it's rolling down from the plywood and the soil, which is a huge insulation, and it's pushing back down on the meat, and it's essentially an oven in the ground at that point. I definitely suggest a good 3 inches of soil on top of that as well to hold that heat in there. You definitely don't want that heat to be seeping out at all. You want to insulate that whole pit.
Quite often when we think of pit roast, we think of our friends over at Alberta Pork. Many people opt for large cuts or even whole hogs in a pit roast. What are the options for those of us who'd like to try a beef this year?
Okay, so this is my go-to. I absolutely love, whenever possible, getting whole primal cuts. Whether it be from the butcher, from the packer, you get lucky, you get big hunks from the farmer. That's my go-to. You can take, say your prime rib roast. When it comes from the packer, it's a 7-bone prime rib roast with the fat cap still on. You just gently trim that fat. You don't have to trim a lot off of it. Season it up, salt and pepper, wrap that sucker heavily in tin foil, and in that pit it goes. And it is the best prime rib you've ever had. It's amazing. I find the more whole the cut, the more tender and juicy it ends up being. The ponderosa cut, or the hind hip, same deal. Absolutely incredible. Huge, bone in, almost like a whole leg. Unbelievable. It takes forever to cook down. We're talking 10, 12 hours. Slow, but the payoff for that, it's feeding 50, 75 people, and it's absolutely incredible. You can cut it with a fork. Amazing.
How should we consider wrapping it ahead of placing it in the pit? You've mentioned, I've seen actually some of your Instagrams where you use tin foil and that sort of thing. Is that something we're doing with this? Are we going back to wet newspaper? What's happening?
No, I definitely suggest, don't be cheap. Get that big roll from Costco or wherever, the wider roll, and just give it 3-4 wraps with tin foil. Make sure it's nicely sealed all over. It doesn't have any rips or tears in it, and it's not gonna leak out. The better you seal that big chunk of meat up, the better it's gonna cook. So I highly suggest, and it doesn't hurt to pour a half a can of beer in there while you're wrapping it as well. That's one of my little sneaky tricks, just to keep it steaming and going while it's in there. I love it.
Do you have any suggestions for, we have to think ahead a bit. We've got to get this big chunk of meat in and out of a hot pit of coals. How should we consider lifting it out? Is there a method that you would suggest for tying it?
So usually, this is another, you could use butcher's twine, right? A good solid string, tie it up, make some handles so that you can kind of pick it up almost on two sides. You definitely don't want to try and pick it up from the middle. It'll rip apart. As well, if you have any kind of steel cable, works the exact same. Or if you have just a steel basket of some kind, you can literally put it in there, leave it in there, just grab some gloves when you're pulling it out.
Okay, so we're ready to cook now. We've got this piece of meat all done up. How long does it need to be on there? You said 10 to 12 hours for some of the bigger cuts.
Yeah, well, this is the thing. You want to make sure you're thoroughly cooking it, right? Also depends, medium rare, whatever you're looking for. You have to know what in that pocket of time you're cooking. There are calculations for this you can find online. It's how many minutes per pound. Those are pretty good guidelines for what you're doing. The temperatures in there, you're going to be looking at about 275 to 325 inside of that pit. If you get your rocks going to a good temperature and you got red coals in there. So if your pit is running around 300 degrees, with that math, a whole prime rib, 7-bone prime rib in that hole could take anywhere up to 6-8 hours. So to be technical, it wouldn't hurt to go 5 hours, slide that plywood back with an instant read thermometer right from the top, drop it in there and see what kind of temperature you have. If you're really wanting to pay attention to it, honestly, with these big cooks, you can overcook it a fair bit. It's still going to be absolutely fantastic, especially if you're going to shred it up, throw it on sandwiches. You're in a great place. If you're looking to hit a medium rare on a piece of meat like that, you're definitely going to want to pay closer attention to that. You can also get wired thermometer probes. Most barbecue guys will have these already, so you can literally throw a thermometer into that piece of meat and still bury it and have a readout of what's happening inside of that pit.
On your Instagram channel, you often sample your work for viewers. I think I already know the answer to this question. But if you can imagine yourself at the pit roast, pulling out whatever piece of meat it is that you've decided to cook and trying it, was it worth all that extra work?
Oh, 100%. So for me, when anybody comes to an event that I'm hosting, I'm cooking at, even the small family get-togethers, the first thing they say to me while people are eating, they can tell in my face instantly how proud I am and how excited I am for people to taste what I've cooked. And if you were the guy that dug that pit, if you were the lady that seasoned up that roast, if you were, all of that hard work goes into that piece of meat to feed your family and your friends. And when you see the look of joy on everybody's face, it could have taken you 3 days, even 4 days to get it done, and you would have gladly spent that time. I'm a huge believer that you put love into it, you get love out of it, and that stands for food with anything, right? If it's worth doing, it's worth doing right. And honestly, the more quality you can add to a cook like this, the bigger the result you and your friends and your family are going to get out of it. So
I like that. You mentioned the community aspect and the sort of the feeling of just having that crowd together. How do we amplify those feelings and the deliciousness of this meat with sides? What sides should we consider using to accompany it?
Well, a classic for this is even throwing, once your meat is kind of in the pocket of where it is, you can get the fire going again in that while you're letting your meat rest. So say you have a 7-bone prime rib that's cooked to your temperature and now it's sitting on the table, it's wrapped in tin foil with a towel around it, and you're letting it rest. Get a fire going in that pit right now. Throw a cast iron with some beans on there. Throw your baked potatoes on there, wrap them up in tin foil, get started on your sides, you have time. That big piece of meat is going to rest for probably half an hour to an hour. You have an hour to make flame roasted beans, baked potatoes, the whole 9 yards.
It sounds delicious. It sounds like we need to have some outdoor gatherings this summer.
Oh, 100%. You could even throw, if you have some expanded metal, just as a grate, you could get a fire going in there, throw that expanded metal over, and you could cook vegetables right then and there. Slice up your beets like half-inch thick discs of beets, everything, and you can fire roast them over the coals right then and there. and then just chop them up, throw them on a cookie pan, on a cookie sheet, and away you go. Bit of salt and pepper, some garlic.
Mel, it sounds like we have to get to work at digging some pits around here, so it's time to get out there. Thank you so much for joining us again for the show.
No problem, madame. Thank you very much for having me.
That was Mel Chmilar Jr., a pitmaster and now two-time guest on the show. You can see some of his work on Instagram at Dark Side of the Grill. That's all for this episode of The Bovine, which means you can focus on sending that buddy an invite to play crib, watch a game, have lunch, or even crop scout with you this week. As always, stay tuned to ABP Daily and your favorite podcast app for our next episode. And if you made it all the way to the end, send me a note and a picture of where you're listening from. On Twitter, it's @AgDeborahM, or by email, podcasting@albertab.org. Thanks so much for listening.